You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Friday. Brian Kamenetzky, Andy Kamenetzky want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com and tell them that Locked On sent you. Andy, you know what's tired? Big twos. You know what's wired? Big threes.
Big threes.
That's right. Holy bleep. The Lakers, say what you will about this, and we have a lot to say about it. The Lakers acquired Russell Westbrook on draft day Thursday in a monumental deal, bigger, I think, even than a blockbuster. I think it's underselling it to call it a blockbuster, Andy. We're going to talk about what we like about it, what we don't like about it, hint at maybe what we think is coming next. But let's start here. What was your reaction when you heard this? Because for me, at least, this was sort of as crazy a day in terms of the way the news unfolded I think I've experienced with the Lakers since like the day that Chris Paul was a Laker for 45 minutes.
Yeah, Russell Westbrook is a seismic event in and of himself. Like he is a human earthquake, in terms of just the energy. I don't mean that. I recognize right now that feels like loaded language because an earthquake is a disaster. But I just mean in terms of the overall force. If you prefer a tsunami, if you prefer a tornado, whatever force of nature
comes in and he shakes your china.
Well, here's the problem.
I got you. I understand.
No such thing as a force.
What
of
you're
nature.
trying to avoid is the connotation that we have now reached disaster.
Right, and the problem
posture
is
in LA.
There's really no such thing as a force of nature event that is inherently positive. That's just the way the world works. But what was funny about this, though, Brian, is like this didn't come out of left field. This is something that had been talked about for a week or so. We addressed it on a podcast.
The whole show about this last week.
Exactly. The rumors that this was already in pretty heavy discussions before it went into overdrive today, and even with the knowledge for like a week or even 2 weeks that this is something that was on the Lakers' radar, it still doesn't compare to the feelings of when it actually happens. Yeah. It's like that scene in Django Unchained when Calvin Candy says, "Gentlemen, you had my curiosity, but now you have my attention." Like that's us to the Lakers front office.
All right. So in case the idea that I have to lay this out for somebody who has clicked on this podcast, like they do not know what I'm about to tell you, seems a little odd, but I guess the rules say it's Russell Westbrook and 2 second-round picks. That 2028 one's looking pretty sweet right now. For
Mike Garcia on next week to break that might be on the radar.
Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Kyle Kuzma, Montrezl Harrell, who opted in just for this, and the 22nd pick in Thursday's draft, which turned into someone, and I have no idea because I don't care because it's not a Laker. So what was crazy about this, though, is that there, like I said, there was this push-pull here because the news came almost. The Trez part of this is really important because the news came early in the afternoon that Montrezl Harrell was going to opt into what amounts to his $10 million option for his final year. Hugely important for the Lakers because it allows them then to include him in a trade. And Shams at The Athletic, Shams Charania, instantly said, like, hey, all right, Montrez is in. The Lakers are constructing a deal for Buddy Hield.
Yeah.
You and I have been big proponents of that in terms of like, this makes a lot of sense. And it looked like it was Kuzma and Trez. No pick. Lots of details to the workout. But at the time, it was those two, and they get to keep the pick. Buddy Hield comes. I'm thinking to myself, that is about as masterful as you can do with the ammunition the Lakers have, even understanding that Buddy is not a perfect player. I get all that. What was it, like 3.5 minutes later, all of a sudden it was like, oh, by the way, actually it's Westbrook. And that was Shams, and it was Woj. And then it went from, hey, they're talking about this, to this is done. Like done. and I've been trying to process it since Thursday afternoon when this became official, and there's weeks worth of stuff I'm still going to have to work out.
Well, I mean, in terms of the decision between Buddy Hield versus Russell Westbrook, and there's no reason to believe that this was not serious between the Lakers and the Kings, because this is also something that had been talked about for a while and
absolutely
reported by a lot of people that these were real conversations being had, and this was also something that, as you said, made a lot of sense for the Lakers. I think in a lot of ways it comes down to the idea of whether you value more the idea of one elite skill set, in Buddy Hield's case, shooting, that the Lakers desperately need, but everything else in the case of Hield, he does somewhere between average to below average to defensively awful,
right?
Something like that, versus Russell Westbrook, who doesn't necessarily shore up a lot of glaring areas of need, but is way better at more things than Hield.
No question. He's a better player. Russ is a way better player than Buddy Hield.
It's not even close. Fit issues aside with the Lakers, it's not even close who's better.
No, it's much better player. Now, my answer to that is, honestly, for what they have and where they are, and we'll talk about why and all that, I had done the Hield deal before the Westbrook deal for a lot of reasons. But let's start here because Russell Westbrook is a Laker, or going to be, I guess, on August 6th, I think, or it's either the 2nd or the 6th, the earliest they can do this. What do you like about this? Let's start with that, because while both of us have serious questions and reservations about this, I do want to start here because Westbrook is still excellent, and he can do a lot of good things for the Lakers and represents certain things about the Lakers, which I think I like. So let's start there. What do you like about it, Andy?
One of the things that actually dawned on me today when I was thinking about this more, Brian, in terms of just everything Westbrook could bring to the table, a big issue the Lakers have had the last couple years during the LeBron era is the drop-off that happens offensively when LeBron is not on the court, sometimes drastically, like just in seconds, like all of a sudden.
Oh, the numbers are awful. Like right. the Lakers offense without LeBron is bottom of the league.
And everything just collapses. And I think that is actually something that could be alleviated with Westbrook, not just because of his talent and his ability to get others involved, his ability to score, the pressure he puts on defenses, but specifically because of the similarity in style between him and LeBron. And we talked about this before in terms of the redundancy factor between them. And that's something that's going to have to be addressed when they're on the court together. And there are a lot of question marks about how they're going to do that. That is going to be, glass half full, a fascinating experiment to watch. But when LeBron is actually off the court, one reason I think this actually could be really beneficial for the Lakers, it's not just Russ's talent, it's the style. Like, this is the first guy you can bring in who will actually be replicating in a lot of ways LeBron's style on the court. Like we've mentioned before, he's kind of like a poor man's LeBron at this stage of his career, which you could do a hell of a lot worse than. But I think it might be more seamless now when Westbrook is on the court without LeBron versus what we've seen with everybody else.
Right. You can make an assumption that at this point, pretty much always two of the three between Westbrook, Davis, and LeBron will be on the floor. Always. You can arrange it to where that is something that can happen. And you're right, with those second units, having Westbrook there as opposed to Schroeder is going to make a significant difference. Something else I like about this is like you cannot accuse the Lakers of not looking at the next 2 years where you have LeBron under contract and still at an elite level, but looking more mortal than perhaps he did before, and not say that they don't recognize it. Like, you got to go win this thing now. Both of us have been spending the summer going, if you have to choose between win now and possibly mortgaging the future a little bit, something that you do win now. You do everything you can to try to take advantage of it now. I don't know if this is the right
the Lakers
thing.
Did down the stretch of Kobe's career pre-Achilles, they took some big swings and they did not all work. And we both feel those were the right decisions.
Absolutely.
They were defensible decisions.
Absolutely. And, this one, isn't as natural to me as, signing Steve Nash and trading for Dwight, or, and all that stuff. But I like that where their headspace is, at least in terms of like, no, we have to go win now. And, for somebody who sat there and praised them for not sitting on the title team and saying, you know what, we just won a title, let's just run it back and see what happens. I think they've overcorrected in a lot of different ways in terms of the amount of talent they brought in, but they're not sitting on, they're not going to sit there and say, look guys, we were 21-6 when people started to get hurt. They think they need to get better, and goddamn, man, they are going to try to do that. Yeah. Let's take a quick, let's do this quick. We'll take a break and come back because
more potential positives that I want to
right. Exactly. I think there are other things that Westbrook does that will help them next year.
Before we address some questions.
Yes. The optimists get to come first. And if you just want to turn, it's like if you don't want to know how Old Yeller ends, just turn off the podcast. And as far as you know, the Westbrook trade was seamless. It was fantastic. And it guarantees the Lakers will win. We'll do that next. All right. So we talked some about, obviously the sort of the philosophically what it means to go get Russell Westbrook. You are taking a big effing swing here. And, to some degree, I respect that. I'll tell you something else.
This is a home run derby on all the cocaine swing. Yeah. I mean, like this is like you are drugged out of your skull.
But it's also too like it's only like it's as if the home runs only count if you hit it 500 feet. Like a 475 foot home run does not count.
If it does not leave the stadium,
it doesn't count. Doesn't count. And so the other thing I like about this, it's fascinating. I mean, like from a things to talk about, things to be interested in, things to watch. It may not always be pretty, but a things to watch, whatever the rating, it's off the charts because let's be honest, the Lakers, they pick up Buddy Hield, they maybe get a couple things. Most of the regular season becomes, this looks pretty good. God, I hope nobody gets hurt. And to some degree, that still holds true.
When are the playoffs start?
Right, until the playoffs start. And then, but now it's like, we've got stuff to watch and look at and analyze and break down and pull our, not pull our hair out, unfortunately. But, metaphorically, like next year just got a lot more interesting. There's no question about that.
I mean, look, you and I are Angelinos. What do Angelinos love to watch more than anything? Car chases. Police chases, car chases, and they always end in car wrecks. Either way, though, they are entertaining. Hopefully,
they're good for ratings.
I mean, a police chase on your local Channel 9 like that, everybody will watch the hell out of that.
As you've pointed out, Andy, what are we all about here on this show? Algorithms.
Well, yes,
the algorithms just got very strong. The Lakers this year.
They did.
All right, but let's look at on the court. Because there are ways and places where adding Westbrook, who is still an excellent player for, he is deeply excellent and also deeply flawed. There are places where he will absolutely help the Lakers.
One thing that I think Westbrook will do that you saw was missed last season, and granted, last season, everything has to be taken with a certain grain of salt because of all the injuries in the second half. But the Lakers, during the championship season, they were at their most elite offensively when they were in transition. And, it was a night and day difference with transition versus everything else.
Yes.
Westbrook helps keep them in transition. And for all of the things that need to be figured out on the court when you have LeBron and Westbrook together, and like, what does Russell Westbrook as a secondary or thirdary ball handler, what does that look like? Those two on the court together will create a shit ton of transition opportunities. And this team running, we missed it last year. Like that was something this team missed. And I think they are, by definition, if you're bringing in Westbrook, you are looking to speed yourself up again. And I think that is for the betterment of this team, especially because in my estimation, there is no way, Brian, that this can work unless Anthony Davis is going to play the majority of his minutes at center. A, because they're going to need to find more shooting to put on the court with him, but B, you just need to be faster. And
yeah, you do. Although I will say, ironically, currently the only other guy that they have on the floor who is a credible shooter from three-point range happens to be their center.
Yeah, I know.
So I still think, like today, if you
he'll throw the outlet passes that get either Westbrook or LeBron going. And then,
but to your point, like even if Gasol ends up starting, and as a nominal starter, 15-minute a night guy, like you want to talk about triggering the break. You have one of the great passers as a center. Get the ball, move it. Westbrook, is an elite rebounder for any position.
If LeBron and Westbrook are running the lanes for a Gasol outlet pass, that is going to put defenses on tilt.
Right. So there's that. The rebounding aspect of, I think, is really important. To have a guard who rebounds like Westbrook does, I think is a great tool for the Lakers to have. And as much as his shooting is problematic, and even his finishing at the rim with the free throw issues and all that, he is still an excellent, he's still a capable and threatening offensive player, just because he is still so relentless and so able to get to the basket, put pressures on defenses that way. He is an elite playmaker. I was looking at, some of the data, as I always do. Go to Cranch's McBasketball, Tim_NBA, B-Ball Index guys. And, he was breaking down some of Russ's numbers there as a playmaker. He is in the top 3 or 4 guys in the league, and the Lakers really need that. And as much as the fit is weird, it is deeply, deeply weird and problematic in a lot of ways, to have another guy who is an elite level passer and playmaker to play next to LeBron James. Mm-hmm. Like, James Harden, same kind of, there were moments where that looked really good. Harden and Westbrook together as 2 elite playmakers. And now you're adding Anthony Davis to that as a guy that you can make plays for. I mean, there are going to be times when cool stuff happens on the floor, and Westbrook is going to be central, I think, to a lot of that stuff. He's too good not to be important for a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, there are no question. There is a lot to be worked out, and I believe we're about to shift into that particular mode.
Can we do one more thing that I like?
Sure, do it.
I just like. How like Frank Vogel used to talk about like Rondo's swag factor?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Westbrook brings a level of swag to this team and a level of just sort of physical toughness and stuff like that. I'm not saying these guys were soft or something last year. Kuz is soft. Case no. Montrezl Harrell, these are not soft people. But in terms of the leadership of your team, he's going to add an element where you have both credibility as a player who is a Hall of Fame level player who has done some things in this league, next to LeBron, next to AD, and I think it does take some of that sort of have an edge pressure off of AD, not necessarily in how he plays, because you have to be even more aggressive, I think, now, but in terms of how he needs to operate. So there's some things I kind of like about the potential chemistry here, because LeBron signed off on this, and AD signed off on this, or there was a 0% chance it would have happened. So I mean, I love Russell Westbrook, the player, and I think he's an awesome dude too, like literally a good dude, but also just fascinating guy with the off the court stuff, with a genuine. We all talk about how like, oh, I don't care what other people think. Of course, we all do, except Russell Westbrook, who really doesn't care.
Russell Westbrook and Andrew Bynum and Rasheed Wallace. That's it. That's it. Those are the 3 guys. One final positive in terms of new faces next year, new vibe, all that stuff. Going from Kuzma to Westbrook is about as seamless a transition fashion-wise as you could have on this team.
Kuz can just leave that mesh shirt thing that he wore on Christmas like in his locker, and Westbrook can just take it.
The carve in there, Kuz was here.
Like Shawshank. I mean, okay, let's get to the rest of it. The Lakers were, I will say this, the Lakers were excellent, are going to be an excellent
You've
team.
had your positivity, you Pollyannas.
Right. The Lakers were going to be an excellent, I will leave it on this though, because before we get into the stuff that I don't like, the Lakers are going to be an excellent team next year. Because they were going to be an excellent team anyway. So the question is this the sort of thing that you do that makes it easier or harder for them to win a title? We will talk about that next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar ever. Bars covered in 100% chocolate, soft. They're easy to chew, not like the ones that require like a hammer and a chisel.
If Russell Westbrook was a protein bar, he'd be one of those. Like you couldn't chew a Russell Westbrook bar.
Right. And I mean, as much respect and admiration as we have for Russell Westbrook as a player, he's just not meant to be a protein bar.
Oh, being a terrible tasting protein bar is a compliment.
Yeah, in this particular context, yes. But Built Bars, they taste great. They're healthy. They're great if you're trying to lose or maintain weight, but you still want something that tastes awesome, low calorie, low sugar, high protein, high fiber. They're great for keto diets. You've got the 12 original flavors like raspberry, coconut almond, salted caramel, banana bread, new flavors including cherry barcia, lemon almond cheesecake, cookies and cream. They taste great, awesome flavor combinations. You're never going to feel bored like you're eating the same thing over and over. So go to builtbar.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15. You get 15% off your first order. Again, promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com.
Okay, so here come the caveats, Andy. Things can change between now and August 6th, I believe it is, when this trade can be made official.
They're going to have to. They've got like 4 people on this roster.
So, I mean, obviously, things can change in free agency. Things can change in the terms even of the deal. More teams could be added.
There's some scuttlebutt among NBA media that this deal could actually get expanded. So
yes, sure. Why not? And excellent use of scuttlebutt. So let's start with it, but there's stuff about this that makes me nervous. Let's start with the things that everybody's talking about. Russell Westbrook, a terrible shooter. Yeah. I mean, the 31.5% that he shot last year from 3-point range is the second highest figure he's had since the 2014-2015 season.
This is not hyperbolic when I say this, Brian. He is one of the worst outside shooters in NBA history.
Yes.
Like that is not hyperbolic.
No, it is a factual statement.
Right. When you take into account volume and percentages, he is as bad an outside shooter as this league has ever seen.
All right. So you may have noticed when last we spoke, Andy, the Lakers had a shooting problem. Mm-hmm. So not only did they bring in Russell Westbrook, who is a terrible 3-point shooter, they shipped out 2 of their better guys in Kyle Kuzma and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. So they went from being a bad shooting team to now a worse shooting team than they were before. So the spacing, I mean, there are a lot of people around NBA Twitter, analysts, whatever, who are much smarter about this stuff than I am. I kind of keep waiting for them to be like, oh yeah, you can solve the space. None of them have said that yet. Nobody seems to have the magic formula for how this shooting thing, as the Lakers are currently constructed, is going to work. The spacing is going to be a problem with these 3 guys. It just is.
Can I make a bold prediction?
Go.
You know how the last couple of years, the Lakers have brought in guys to be shooting specialists, and for the most part, it just hasn't panned out. Like guys who've come in and have been really good in the past. Like this is where they've made their money. And other than like really KCP, none of them have been able to hit shots on a regular basis. There have been, though, a couple of weird anomalies like Rajon Rondo in the playoffs, not known ever in his career as an outside shooter. Rondo actually became a pretty good outside shooter for the Lakers. Lance Stevenson arrived as a terrible 3-point shooter. His one season with the Lakers, he was like 38%. Russell Westbrook is going to be the bizarro shooter that comes to the Lakers and actually can make outside shots. Like
he's gonna be Russ's career high. So what you're saying is book it. Russ's career high is 34% from three. He's going to shatter that next year.
You know what? I'm gonna say he's gonna be the bizarro version of everybody else that comes to Staples Center and gets sucked into this vortex. 37%.
Nice.
There you go.
I like it. The other thing that I don't like about Russ is that I am concerned about is
terrible about this prediction.
Nobody's going to remember. He is growing more inefficient, I should say, every year. Whether you're talking about his efficiency at the rim, where he's still, is a good finisher, and he still gets to the rim a lot, and he's, a relentless force in that way. He is less efficient finishing there than he used to be. As a free throw shooter, he is declining significantly. He used to be in the 80s. Now he's in the 60s pretty routinely, low 70s, high 60s. That is not good.
It's very strange, like what's happened to him as a free throw shooter. Like I've seen some speculations, and I don't remember the exacts of what it was, but there was a rule change that messed with Russell Westbrook's routine. And like Russell Westbrook is notoriously OCD. Like he is OCD about everything, like in ways that would make Rain Man be like, dude, like seriously,
lighten up.
And like, it's been speculated that ever since that's when his free throws, started just falling into the toilet. That being said, though, his worst percentages are like 66%, and he's had two recent seasons in the 70s. Like that would actually be,
if he was in the 70s, it'd be okay. But the ones in the 60s, the trend is definitely down from when he's had two seasons in the last four in the 70s, and two, ironically, exactly the same, 65.6%.
Yeah.
The other thing that I find really troubling about Westbrook, and this is, I think, more problematic for the conversation that we are having about the Lakers, which isn't, are they elite? Obviously they are. They were elite before. They're still elite. It's, what does this mean for the playoffs? As inefficient as Westbrook is during the regular season, his last few postseasons have been catastrophically bad in that regard.
He's been hurt at times during it.
He has,
to be fair, but
you can come up with but in the playoffs when teams can scheme more. I mean, look at what the Lakers did 2 years ago. Basically, like when Harden had the ball, they ignored Westbrook completely. Like you can, or if you have the ball, like now, so either he's going to be off the ball, I would completely ignore the guy, or you set up a situation where to maximize Westbrook's ability, you put the ball in his hands. Well, that's fine. Now I just do everything I possibly can to keep him from giving it to LeBron or giving it to AD. And I say, Russell Westbrook's going to take 30 shots for 7 games. And if we lose, great, Russ beat us. And I realize it's not that simple. It's not.
I was going to say it's pretty hard to do that.
But it is as a strategy, where throughout a series, like that's sort of the overarching
I need to see that pulled off when you're not accounting for one superstar teammate, but two. But your general point, I understand what you're saying.
You're right. These are because I don't even know what the team looks like yet. I mean, like that's the thing too. So much can change, but it's Thursday. We're doing this the night that this trade was executed. These are the things that I'm worried about. And as a playoff contributor, the stuff that he's bad at feels like it's going to be more problematic. Or let me rephrase. The stuff that he's bad at feels like it could be more problematic than the stuff that he's good at, because it's harder to run in the playoffs. Teams wall that stuff off. They'll give up the boards. They won't crash the offensive glass. It is much harder to run. You are much more likely to find yourself in a half court than you are in that open floor thing. So that's one thing that's sort of mitigated. His impact in the half court as a pick and roll guy, like go under every single screen. That limits what the Lakers can do with him as a pick and roll guard. Like all of this stuff in the playoffs seems to become more problematic. Because he doesn't do any of the stuff that helps them in the half court.
Yeah, I have a feeling he's going to
he doesn't meet some of the needs that they have in the half court.
Yeah, I mean, I could imagine they're going to try to make him in the half court like just an incredible cutter, an incredible off-ball guy, like to keep track of stuff like that. But you're correct. Stationary, he does not really serve much of a purpose off-ball.
For a team that was a bad half-court team.
Yeah.
So here, and then this is the other part of this, and here's why I'm nervous, and unfortunately, at least the nerves around this probably only last 2 weeks, give or take, 3 maybe. There's a lot the Lakers theoretically need to do here, and it's not just fine shooting, Andy. It's they need wings, like badly. They badly need wings. They need defenders, and all this stuff that they've done on Thursday puts them in a box where not only now do you need shooting, you need shooting that can play with Westbrook, Davis, and LeBron. Like, it can't be a guy who's for the second unit. That's great. That's nice. It helps. But they need to find a shooter or two who can play with those 3 guys, because otherwise that's not going to help you very much in the postseason and fourth quarters when those are the guys who are going to be on the floor. So, I mean, they have a lot that they need to do and very little ammunition left to do it.
Yeah, I mean, look, a guy like Caruso, for example, they need the shooting that they've seen at times from him to be permanent. And, they tell him, look, at this point, your playmaking responsibilities are non-existent. We need you to be able to hit 38 to 42% from behind the arc, automatic. That is the only thing you need to worry about at all. That and play defense. That is
play defense, because he's going to have to be on the floor. Like, sure, at least exactly. The Lakers are currently constructed next to Russell Westbrook, who is still an enthusiastic player, not a great defender anymore. No. But he tried. I mean, he's going to work. He'll do it. But he's I
think on this team he will be better than he's been in the past,
because everybody is. I felt the same way about Buddy Hield, by the way.
Right. I think that would have actually been more of a real undertaking. But a couple other concerns I want to get into before we talk just a little bit about KCP and Kuzma. As far as concerns go.
By the way, I wasn't done. I'm going to save some of these for Sunday. Monday's show. We've got weeks.
Exactly.
We've got weeks.
A couple other concerns I have really quick. Just their top 3 guys now are all guys that there are questions about either mileage, a little bit of injury history, or both. And, on one hand, that's why 3 can be better than 2 when it comes to having your stars, like the odds of hopefully keeping as much star power on the floor as possible increases when you add one more legitimate superstar. But all 3 of them are guys that you have some legitimate concerns about staying on the floor.
Sure, absolutely.
And then the other thing really quickly before getting into KCP.
But by the way, that is part of the reason why depth is going to matter. People are like, it doesn't matter. Depth is going to matter a lot. And the Lakers are in a position now where building credible depth is going to be difficult. I mean, they have, for people, just what we're talking about here, what they have left, and maybe we'll talk, for Monday about maybe how they go about doing this stuff. They have the taxpayer mid-level. I think it's fair to say they're going to be in the tax. Then they have minimum level, veterans minimum contracts, and they have potentially what you could get back in a sign and trade where you send out Schroeder, you send out Caruso, or you send out THT. And I think that might become slightly more likely now. If you're in win now mode, you need to bring stuff back. We'll talk about that maybe on Monday. But that's really what you have. You can send those guys out if you sign and trades are very hard to construct. You have one exception, and that's in minimum level contracts. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a challenge for Rob Pelinka. I mean, when you take a swing like this, you do it knowing that you're going to have to make up a lot on the back end. The only other thing that I just wanted to mention right now, and again, these are all things we're going to elaborate on more over the course of the week, but just Westbrook is not a guy that you think of as blendable. You know what I mean? Like, he's not somebody that you think of as, you know what, we're going to bring him into this mix and then just sit back and watch everything quietly coalesce because he's just like, he's the opposite of somebody like Kevin Durant, who you could drop Kevin Durant onto any team and it'll work. Like LeBron in a lot of ways. You can drop into any team and it'll work. Westbrook, though, is not that guy, which doesn't mean that it can't work. But it does mean there's going to be a lot of work involved to make it work.
Right. We talked about like DeMar DeRozan as an example of somebody who has some of the same problems that he would bring, but is a much easier guy to integrate into what they were doing. But that gets back to the point I was making before. What do you do with these deeply elite, deeply excellent, and also deeply problematic players? Ben Simmons, Rudy Gobert. Like, how do you build? And the problem with Westbrook, I feel like, is he's the guy that you figure out those pieces around. You know, you how do I assemble the best team? But I don't think he's quite that good anymore to be that guy. And I don't think I agree with you that he adapts the other way. But we'll talk more about that maybe Monday and into next week. KCP and Kuz going out is kind of sad. I like those guys.
Yeah, I mean, I tweeted this out at Cam Brothers, and KCP. When you think about just his time with the Lakers, he went from being like a clutch tax punchline. You know, like when he was brought in, it was just tampering season, and he was there because he's a clutch client. He's the pipeline to Rich Paul and LeBron, and you know the manna from heaven press conference with Rob Pelinka, and he was just this walking ready set punchline that, look, you and I engaged in many times. It was low hanging fruit, and we were not above it. But he went from that punchline to catching just constant hell from Laker fans because of the wild swings in his plays. And at times it got brutal. The early part of that championship season, it got really, really rough to watch KCP endure what was a tough start to the season. Then he turned it around. It was fantastic. And then he became arguably the third best player on a championship team. Like those 4 years he had in LA were a pretty big roller coaster, but on balance, it's a really nice redemption story. That guy was popular in the locker room. His team,
he really is just a genuinely solid dude. I mean, I'm not saying I know the guy well, but in the interactions that I had with him, just there was the
Seal Beach, detention,
there's a reason. There's a reason he, like guys like Frank Vogel and whatever, and his teammates stuck with him so deeply. Yeah, it's because he's an easy teammate. So all he does is go out and work his ass off and do what is asked of him to the best of his ability. And it is great.
And then, Kuz had a really interesting career with the Lakers too. Like when he showed up, there was so much excitement around Lonzo in the beginning. Lonzo Ball was second overall, and Magic saying, "Don't break all my records," and the VAR ball of it all, and all that stuff. And Kuzma ended up this found money sensation late in the first round. Way more polished a scorer than anybody anticipated, and he had like a real star personality. And then since then, he's really had to adapt a lot in terms of what a team needed from him, and he became a very mature guy. I think, not that he arrived immature, but there was maturity that he gained as a professional that I thought was really cool to watch. I mean, I still don't know if he can be as good of a player as he thinks he can, or, as sort of statsy good as I think he pictures himself. But it's not going to be for a lack of effort, and it's not going to be for a lack of seriousness.
I'm excited. I'm interested. I'm really interested to see what he does in Washington with a little bit more space to operate and a little more freedom to be what he thinks he is, and we'll see.
Guarantee he's going to be happy with his clothing options in DC more than Sacramento.
No question. All right. Well, we went a little long. We went a little long on this episode. I think that is justified given that the Lakers traded for Russell effing Westbrook. We might blow through the half-hour mandate from HQ a few times over the next couple of weeks.
I think you'll understand.
Sorry, David, but wow. You like it, you don't like it. This was and will be one of the most fascinating moments in Lakers history. And we are going to break the hell down of this moment going forward. Lots on the YouTube channel. Thanks so much for subscribing to that. We'll be back because next week is when all the important stuff really starts now with reconstructing the remainder of this team. Free agency begins next week. So we'll have all the analysis there, both on the podcast and the YouTube channel. So make sure you're subscribed to all of it and you don't miss a thing. And we will see everybody next time. Have a great weekend.